Thank you for jumping on. And no, I mean it's been fun to see just how Father Time has progressed so far. So happy to and excited to kind of dive in a little more here. But I think the first big question is for those who don't know is just kind of why bourbon? Why dive into that category? Why what is it about it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's interesting. I call it my bourbon consciousness because I've learned so much and I still have so much to learn. But my consciousness, I'm a late bloomer. I feel as though during the pandemic, I really uh, you know, got opened up and started to enjoy uh, the spirit of bourbon. Uh,
Hmm.
sure. But then what, and then what really occurred was as I learned more and more, I started to really get into it.
Hmm.
And Father Time, which I love the process, but it's in some ways it's a very um, I feel like I have a different approach to having my own brand than most people who come from the entertainment industry. I selfishly am using it as a tool to learn more and kind of uh, access better quality. I'm not, this isn't I've known Blake for a little bit, and that I'm not kind of in this to kind of make a quick buck. And my journey into having my own bourbon was, I was very reluctant. Initially, I was approached to do a tequila, and I was approached to do a whiskey, and having tried so many horrible select spirits, and which eventually led to I think it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving where I reached out to a college friend of mine who uh, lived in Louisville, is from Louisville, and I was like, couldn't we do this and it would be less icky because
Yeah.
one I had, and they were probably pitching it probably how they would pitch it to most people, kind of like, look, you'll just kind of sign off on things, and then you'll maybe make money. And
Where do I sign? I mean, with a great pitch like that,
yeah,
it's just
I, I was not interested in that. And tequila, obviously, I look like somebody who knows a lot about tequila, but
I mean,
it's one of those things where obviously Stu and I are buddies from college, and he presented it with the notion, like, I was like, couldn't I just pick some bourbon and we
Mhm.
could put it, and he goes, yeah, you might end up with a fair amount of bourbon if no one buys it. And I'm like, but it's bourbon that I picked.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I kind of that's kind of guided me through this, is hopefully being humble and kind of learning as I go. But as I've, you know, learned more and more, I get more and more sucked in.
Yeah.
Like everyone who knows what Seelbach is, they're too far gone. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a funny thing because occasionally I'll post these videos kind of talking about father time. I try to make it not so icky, maybe hopefully humorous, and occasionally people will be like, this is so sad that you're selling the devil's Kid. And I'm like, it's much worse than that. It's not for my it's because I,
Yeah, it's actually I'm actually paying a lot of
it,
money to then.
they're, they're
Yeah.
and thankfully, Stu, my partner in this, is not motivated by a financial.
Mhm.
He's just as much of a bourbon nerd as me, and so I just think it's so funny that they think that like this is some money thing where it's like
Mhm.
some of it is the and as every person who spends too much time thinking about bourbon, and my algorithm is completely just other nerds talking.
You go to that explore page and it's just dudes in liquor
Yeah,
stores. It's
it's less. I'm far less concerned about developing a serious drinking problem or wasting money on investing in some big payoff. It's my obsession is really, and I think it's a healthy obsession. I say to my wife, "This is better than me having an affair, right?"
Yeah, there are way worse things I could spend these late night hours scrolling through Instagram looking at.
Yeah,
It's,
and
it's bourbon bottles
you
is very.
the my bourbon obsession or American whiskey obsession has really it is it has informed some of my stand up. You came to the
Mhm.
Lexington, and the material keeps kind of expanding, and it's fun because there's you know for some of the references I'm making, with all material, you want the topic to be universal so that you don't have to spend too much time explaining. But like, there's the creative task of making jokes or doing material on bourbon that is really challenging because me 4 years ago I didn't know uh, much about rye liquor. It's like
Mhm.
or rye whiskey. I just knew that it was made from rye and that that's everyone's least favorite bread. You know what I mean? That's really what I knew, and so some of it is fun developing the material and um, making it work for a broader audience, and for some of the people that come to my shows don't drink, not yet. I'm gonna make
That's right.
drink responsibly. I gotta figure out a joke because that's I always think that's really fun how on all the websites that I spend way too much kind of if you're a collector you end up having to put in your birthday every 3 minutes, and that like drink responsibly as if that's ever stopped someone like, well, I was gonna overdo it, but this Jim Beam website said drink responsibly. Well,
As I
They
remember my
link me
birthday,
to
I
a
decided not
yeah,
to.
but
yeah.
How
That's
has the
funny.
how the audience responded? I mean, you've been doing this a long time. Having that kind of material, how's the audience responded
it,
to
it
that?
it's good. It's it's definitely a journey. Like I probably have you know 15 close to 20 minutes on it, and some of it is you can kind of I've been doing it long enough to know if people are not climbing on board. Whereas like say a Saturday show at 9 o'clock, people are right in the wheelhouse of, and it's not just exclusively talking about bourbon. It's the adult perspective on maybe consuming alcohol, but it is also kind of, but that's also what I think why the material works is because there is something about bourbon and the craftsmanship and the culture, and some of it is clever marketing, and so I can make light of things in an affectionate way.
Yeah.
I can talk about like I have jokes about chicken cock, which I just think is so funny. And
I was gonna
already,
say some of it's just universal funny. Yeah,
like, people don't have to have tried chicken cock to get the fact that that's an absurd thing, but also from a point is what they would call a male chicken in the 1800s. You know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah. Which it is. It's always funny to me just how far I've seen you dive in, both from the brand side and just everything else. And we'll have people message us, and it's like, hey, Jim Gaffigan's coming to town, and he messaged us to come by the distillery and go to a show. Is this spam? Is this? And I'm like, no, it's really him. I mean, I think you've actually turned us on to some brands where you're like, hey, I was in Spokane, Washington. I went to this distillery, and how has that kind of evolved over the years while you're on tour of, hitting different distilleries, brands, getting them to bring whiskey, all
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it is. I mean, that's a very. I mean, that's. I feel very fortunate because, you know, some of it started. I would do shows, and some of it was my poor tour manager, Matt. I would be so. I think it really kind of started when I was in Salt Lake and the High West folks, and inviting them, and they were, like there's different groups of people from a distillery, like so the master distiller, the marketing team, and then there might be like someone from a sales team that might want to come, and I'm so thirsty for this knowledge
That's right.
and hearing about specific brands, and it's it's reminded me a lot of, comedians and chefs have a very similar, like there's a lot of, obviously it's both creative, but I feel like it applies in the bourbon world too, where
Mm,
there is, there's a patience that goes into some of these, to obviously the science and the craft of bourbon is, and then there's marketing. So the luxury I have is when I'm in a city. So like for instance, this weekend I'm in Greenville, and then I'm doing Charleston. And Charleston, I think I know some chicken cock people, and which is out of Kentucky, but Burnt Church is coming,
mhm.
and so selfishly I get to meet some of these people. Like I met the couple that are behind Garrison Brothers, and
Mhm.
I've gotten to meet all these. Like I'm not really impressed by some celebrities, but when I meet kind of like some bourbon, eighth generation, you know, I don't want to put a name on it. It's like I'm kind of impressed by these people. I'm a little bit, like Julian Van Winkle is a very nice, normal guy, but there is something. There's a mystique about it. But I feel that way also about even when I meet smaller distilleries. Like there's, and there's one from every state, because every bourbon nerd, because I travel, and if you travel a lot and you're into bourbon, you're like, I'm going to get a bourbon from every, and
That's right.
then, you know, I had this opportunity through the Wall Street Journal where they asked me what I would recommend for a Christmas present, what I wanted, and what I wanted was the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, and someone gave it to me. I won't point it out, but uh, I what I did, because I had already started visiting all these distilleries, was a local
Mhm.
bourbon. So like
Mhm.
I'm from in Indiana. There is Journeyman has, they have one in Michigan and one in Indiana. And so some of it's local business, and I know that sometimes people will check it out, but a lot of it's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw it as an opportunity to help out these local brands and these local distilleries, and they really are similar to comedians. Like it's a long, like
Yeah.
even if they're just sourcing it, it's a long shot. It appears very sexy on the outside, but like you got to do it for the love of it. So,
Hmm.
uh, if,
Yeah.
lucky to
We
invite
we
some.
hit we hit that sometimes where it's like when we're talking about bringing on new brands, and it's like, hey, how do we tell them we just don't think it's a fit? But at the same time, they've put their life savings, they've mortgaged the house, they've been doing it for 10 years, and for whatever reason, it just like it's hard to say no to somebody when everything that goes into it. It's like, well, let's just bring in some cases, see what we can sell at times. But it really is. It's that,
Yeah.
they're working, they're hustling and grinding it out, and
Mhm.
some of them making incredible products, which I think is really fun to see. Just with the brands that you highlight, it's what we've been trying to do. Obviously, you just have a massive platform compared to Seelbach, so it is cool though to see you highlight these smaller brands and distilleries. It's like, oh, I've tasted a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
This is actually really good, which kind of leads into the next question. So, on the road, what have been to some of your favorite pours so far?
Well,
I mean, I know it's kind of like what's your favorite child, maybe,
I
but
that, it's like, because there is also something I want them all to succeed. It
Mhm,
also,
mhm.
some of it is, it's been, a lot of them are like couples. It's
Yeah.
like a husband and wife team, or it's just like two buddies that started a business, like forward slash down in Orlando. Like,
Hmm.
you meet these guys and they're like
Yep.
buddies. Um,
You go there
but
and they've got a kid running around, and then it's like, I gotta let the dog out, so I gotta get.
you know, and I mean, I'll answer your question, but I also just love it because I'm in, comedians and actors and writers are freelancers,
Mm.
right? There is, it's kind of a running joke whenever a comedian gets married. I always look at that woman or man that's marrying this comedian, and I'm like, you made a mistake, and
Do you know what you're getting into?
I these people that had these whiskey dreams, and I look at their spouse, and there's a certain kind of like they're doing it. But by the way, this applies to so many bourbon stories,
Mm.
right? It's just, and some of it might apply to the 10 that are in North Carolina, the 10 that are in Pennsylvania, but it applies to the I could name 30 in Kentucky that have very similar stories where
Yep.
you know uh, Drew and the Van Winkles both have a story of like a kid making a label on a MacBook, right? It's pretty universal. So like some of the smaller regional or state-run distilleries have the same stories, and there's a passion behind it, which kind of ties into the craftsmanship. But ones that I love, it's shifted. My palate's
Yeah.
kind of also is like. Uh, I mean, there was one McLaughlin, which is he does the baby barrel kind of thing. That it was pretty smooth, and some of it is, to be fair to some of them, I you know I can't go to these distilleries the day of a show. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think I
Would make
went.
for an interesting show, but probably not
Absolutely.
the performance people come to and paid to see.
I did this mini tour through Kentucky and Tennessee where my brothers were with me. So we went
Mhm.
and we went to Chattanooga and we went to uh, Buffalo Trace. But like that was just because my brothers were there, because that was kind of like it's like I'm not trying to conquer the world. I'm not Bert Kreischer. You know what I mean? It's like I you know,
You could get a shirtless bit going. I feel like there.
but like so, so some of the brands I've been given bottles and I haven't even tried them yet. Like you know, that's, and I'm trying to figure out a joke on this where there is and I'm not warehousing it. I'm not like, oh, I'm never going to open it. It's just like, at what point
Hmm.
do I get to try all the all the whiskey I got from Pennsylvania? Because I did a show in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. It's like, so it's just a lot of and because it's a real it's a great predicament to be in. So it's like
Yeah.
uh but I don't know, I would never want to uh you know speak too positively of one because it's like like there's a butcher thing out of Detroit that
Oh yeah.
that I thought
The
was
Bloody Butcher from Detroit Distilling.
yeah.
That's a great one. Yeah.
And but gosh, I mean, there's so many, and then there's some that you meet these people and it affects how you feel about the
Yep.
brand,
100%.
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's a salesperson for a Southern Star who's
Hmm.
like a great and like provided and like and when we had that Lexington event, it's just like I want to try Larrikin. They have this on where I'm like I still don't even know what it is, but I want to. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's also what I love about the bourbon world is similar to comedians. They're a bunch of misfits, but they all kind of fit together. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's also dependent on the day, dependent on it's hard to just say, yeah, this is my favorite. It's like, well, this is good because of this. I love this story. And I think that's a good way of putting it, where it's like, it's just a bunch of misfits at the end of the day. And somehow but it's always interesting to try something new. That's why I love what we do, because we get to try so much different stuff. And it's like
Hmm.
week by week, we get to see what's new, what's tasting good, what people are chasing. Sometimes people are chasing stuff we don't love. Sometimes we put stuff out that we love that people are like, "Eh," but that's the fun of the bourbon
Yeah,
world.
I mean, you're doing it very in a very brilliant way, which um,
I'm gonna record that to send to my wife and just just real quick, if we'll just clip that out.
with I think that, and Stu is totally on board for this, but like we're not doing the you know, it's interesting because I live in New York City with 5 children, which makes no sense whatsoever. I have this urban brand where it's like Stu and I try every barrel. Like we don't sit there. I mean, we have a certain mash bill that we like and all that,
Mhm.
but it's I would rather try, like we're not like we purchase barrels from a lot of different places and I would rather make sure that I like the barrel than like
Mhm.
buy 5,000 barrels.
Hmm.
Does that make
Yep.
Yeah,
no? But it
yeah,
is the difficult way to do it. But I feel like that's what Seelbach does too, right?
yeah.
Yep.
It's like we talk about even like in the warehouse. It's like, well, we can't really have a warehousing system because we just go through like 12 new SKUs every week and they may not ever be back again. And
Yep.
but that's the fun
Yeah.
of it. Like certainly there are other business models that's like, oh, cool, we just sell 10,000 cases of one SKU, but I think there's spots for that in the industry. But no, I mean on the Father Time thing, um, I just keep smelling my glass. I should have started drinking earlier, but
Oh
let's talk
yeah.
about a little bit about that, where the name came from, how you got to the label, and how that all. I mean, we know we got the backstory, but the physical label and name, where did all that come from?
It's so funny because I've been doing all these videos essentially lying about what the why it's called Father Time. But it really, my journey or to my bourbon and enlightenment occurred during the pandemic and with my wife, and it was as a result of, I think, the stress of having teenagers, and
Mm.
alcohol is the answer. But like, there, there is something about, and it also coinciding with, I have a lot of material about being a father that I wanted to do something that obviously bourbon has a rich history of acknowledging, you know, uh, men and all that. So it's not like that, but I wanted it to something like I just, like the slogan, "A father's joy is earned." It's just kind of if you sign up to be a parent and you show up, it's like, yeah, maybe your kid gets drafted by the NFL. But
Statistics would say.
there's there's victory parade, and
Mm,
so there is something. I don't want to say that it's a medicine, but like the Father Time was kind of specifically, and at that time I was writing a lot of material about how maybe fathers are underappreciated and stuff like that. So it was kind of this tribute, and I was also, you gain a perspective when you become a parent. You gain a perspective along the way. When you become an adult and you're paying bills, you have a different perspective on your parents.
Yeah.
But I think, particularly for me, I was gaining a perspective and a respect for, or an appreciation for my father.
mm,
And so, and that made me think of like his relationship with his father. And so some of it is a nostalgic look at that impossible task of being a parent or being a father in particular, and the relationship they might have with a son. But some of it is also making it very a humorous thing.
mhm.
And also, I've always been writing a lot of stuff about parenting, so I wanted to kind of tie that in. So with every uh, Father Time batch or skew or whatever we want to call it, is there's a little snippet about that parenting experience. And so Middle Child Mystery is, again, some of the insight I'm learning, which kind of is about how, the middle child is a little bit of a mystery. We know about birth order and stuff like that, but, if the birth order stuff is true, then wouldn't the middle child have received the benefit of being the youngest? And, so it's just kind of middle child mystery, and how, like, there is this perspective that the middle child's always ignored, but in some ways, wouldn't that be the perfect sense? So it's like any creative project, it's hopefully presenting questions, but most importantly to me is that I like the taste of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things which started the whole thing, where I didn't want someone to tell me what the liquid should be, or the juice. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I wanted to I wanted to, when I grab a bottle of Father Time, which I do every morning. No,
Before I brush my teeth, because that's how you taste it the
that,
best.
that I'll want to drink it. And so there is kind of part of me. It's like, it sounds like bullshit, but like there is part of me like, this batch hasn't sold out. Where there when it sells out, I'm like, less for me. You know what
Mm.
How many does Blake have in reserves at the warehouse?
I mean? And there comes a point where because we also want people to buy it, but it comes a point where it eats into the Stu and Jim.
Can
But,
you can you
but
talk a bit about the
there's a lot of hard work that's gone into this, and by hard work I mean me just sitting at home after doing comedy and sampling and
Yeah,
typing
barrel
and
after barrel.
sampling. No, and then the next doing 5 other projects is like, yeah, I didn't know that one either. And we keep narrowing it down, but we're drunk guys talking to each other on the phone, which is
Can you talk, so you talked in the very beginning about the, going on tour, and this allowed you to meet folks from all over the place, and expand your knowledge of bourbon while doing that. How now that you've been doing this for a little bit, has that folded back into the continued releases that we're seeing with Father Time? So, you've done several, we're here with Middle Child Mystery. This one's cask
Think of it.
strength. You didn't start off cask strength,
well, that was probably the biggest. I think anyone that really gets into bourbon, not well, I don't know. I guess everyone's different, but for me, it seems like a lot of the people that have been in their bourbon uh, obsession, you kind of you steer towards a higher proof, right? So I'll be at I'll check into a hotel, and the hotel will do something nice, get me a bottle of bourbon, and it'll be like, sometimes it's like an 80 proof, and I'm like, what the
What am I gonna do with this water bottle?
yeah. Whereas, like, God, oh my God, what an amazing thing. But so I've been ruined. That's what I've been ruined from generosity. Now, we say that there is there's all these terms. You want your bourbon to be approachable, but there is part of me that, I definitely prefer a higher proof now. But my wife doesn't. So, and also, it's just you don't. I'm doing this definitely for myself, but I also want it to be approachable. And the key thing when we did it the first time is I wanted it to be smooth, because a lot of the celebrity spirits I tried were just bad, So that was a big thing, was like, it's got to be smooth, which, some people know is approachable, and so that was something that, even with our, with our higher proof, our Nestor strength, it's definitely making sure that it's smooth. And by the way, I feel completely comfortable in the fact that my contribution to this is identifying what I think is good. Like, I would,
Yeah.
I could lie and say, oh, I'm back here and I'm mixing, it's just not the case. But I do think that, similar to writing and rewriting, some of the thoroughness that makes something good for stand-up is a skill set that hopefully I could bring to Fathertime, where it's like, there's been a couple times it's not good enough. I'm not,
Mhm.
I'm not an absolute purist, but, like, it has to be selfishly, it has to be something I want to drink, which I think people don't engage in. And I'm not saying I have some earth-shattering palate, but it is the best palate in North America.
That's right. No, but I think
The
that's one
spirit
thing.
competitions.
That's one thing I had mentioned to Blake, and I think I mentioned it to Stu also early on from trying this. One of the things that we talked about is trying to get away from calling it another celebrity whiskey, but if it was lumped into those categories, that was one of the things I first noticed about it, is that this was, in even the lower proof bottle, that first edition of Father Time was just something that was so easy to go to and had the flavors that I would like
Mhm.
to look for, which you can't always say with products, again, that are lumped in that kind of category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. We've got a lot of great people working with us, and I think it's also, the fact that we're we're not some race to
Mhm.
where I'm not looking to conquer the world. I would love, to, because all the money we make goes back into, like, purchasing, you know, better barrels, or uh, improving, as I learn more and more, the bourbon. But yeah, I don't know. We're very lucky. It's there's a lot of good team members, and there's like-minded people that want to do something of quality, because that's the thing in the entertainment industry. There's a lot of people that are, if you chase the money, uh, you might get the money, but it's not going to be satisfactory.
Yeah.
It's got to live with your product. So that's where it's like, it has to be something that I want to drink. And also, similar to my stand up, it's like, if my kids walk in the room, I'm not going to be embarrassed. You know what I mean? They're going to be embarrassed. But
That's no matter what happens. I don't know what at point you become cool with your kids, but it's definitely not where my kids are now. I can say that with confidence. It's uh,
Seelbach's, when they realize, they're like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, you've got all this stuff."
That's what I try to tell them. And one
Yeah.
day, my oldest was like, "Now, all you do for a living is bourbon?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "But like a job?" I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, it's the bourbon." And then we're in the car with some of his football friends riding home from practice, and they're like, "Yo, your dad does bourbon? That's
Yeah.
awesome." I'm like, "See, you're just sheltered. I am cool. I told you so." And but
It
no,
does
I didn't.
create a difficulty working from home though. You can't be tasting and doing tasting notes and yelling at your children at the same time. I think they will just
Oh,
have like a different type of connection there.
yeah. No, and I've got all these teenagers. By the way, it's after school, so there's going to be some people storming in, and I'm going to be sitting here bourbon at 3. But uh, yeah, it is. But hopefully, they've seen me work enough to handling, because there's I get boxes. I can show you these a week of just different barrels that Stu and I are kind of checking out, and it's if they didn't know how hard I work, they'd be like, "What is wrong?"
Yeah. Which so on the boxes topic, so we've got the middle child mystery now live. People can buy it. One, as a middle child, I was a little upset that this is, it took a few releases to get there, but I'll water under the bridge. But no, when will it be shipping? I know we have it coming to us in a few weeks.
Yeah,
And going into that blend, talking about the boxes, like how many barrels are you tasting through? How many different blends just to say, hey, I think we hit it. I think this is
it
the one.
there's a couple. There's definitely some rounds, and
Mm.
again, you guys know this. It's like there's the barrel selection process. Then there's also, you know, determining what, and while that's occurring, we'll get a mix, and so like when for twins, we were getting kind of some secondary aging, kind of like this
Mhm.
2 4 weeks, and so
Yeah.
always stuff kind of coming in, but it becomes a blur because this starts a long time ago, right? It
Yep.
starts identifying it, and also, but the guiding principle is always quality, right? Which is, I guess, if you were talking to anyone, that would be their point. But like, there is kind of just a lot of dinging of things going, yeah, that's, I think and I'm learning. So like, I think it's so interesting that with bourbon, you can have like this 12-year-old barrel and it's not great. And you'll be like, maybe it'll get good. Like, I thought there's,
Wouldn't it go the opposite direction?
it get, but sometimes it will get good, right? And,
Yeah.
and just in the short time Stu and I have been doing this, I've tasted things that 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago were, pretty different, right?
Mhm.
And that's some of the magic also of like, I mean, I would love to learn how to blend, but like that's also some of the magic of blending is that, um, what I do know I do like a high rye bourbon, but and we have a certain mash bill that seems to always be in our blends, but I'm not a huge rye guy. Like
Mhm.
I think that's almost a separate topic that I'm always curious about, because there are people that come to shows and they'll be like, "You're not there yet. Like you'll get." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's kind of like you're not in college yet.
Yeah.
You'll eventually grow to be a man and drink rye. And there is kind of like baby needs a little of that sweet corn. So I'm
Oh,
if I will get there, but who knows?
that's yeah, that's the fun of it. I mean, I do like some rise. I usually tell people to try them blind. And I'm like, if you there's some ryes you can pick out blind, but there's others who, I mean, we went through a string of rye barrels that were just incredible, and we'd
Mhm.
have people say like, let us know when the bourbon comes back available. But yeah, there is something to that corn sweetness that just rounds everything out and makes it
Yeah, I
delicious.
mean,
Um,
if it's like Thomas H. Handy, it's
yeah,
like it's like that's yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, it's like I'm not a tequila guy, but like you can find a tequila that I would like,
yeah.
you know.
Was gonna say, bring out, 1942 or something, and yeah, I'll drink it with you. I'm in for that. Well, cool. Well, and one of the last questions, I know gardening is another hobby you've talked about a bit. When are we gonna have a bourbon made from the Gaffigan grown corn? Like, one, two stalks and just turn it in on a small still and.
That would be, I mean, that is, believe me, don't think I haven't thought about that.
Have you bought farmland yet?
I, one of those things where it's definitely like a fantasy to do the whole grain to glass thing, but
hmm
um, I as of right now, we're talking, and I have an apartment in New York City. I mean, we have in upstate New York, but like there's not enough land to do that. And I also, by the way, I love gardening, and I'm from Indiana, but I've yet to successfully grow enough corn to feed my family. You know what
To have a single dinner with the
I
family.
mean? Yeah, right. And this is like my fourth year I'll be growing corn, and for 3 years, just nothing. I mean, and some of that's bad, and I'm learning, but yeah. So I mean, I would love to. That would be great, but again, I don't have the land, and that's a big commitment. You know what I mean?
That can be down the road. That can be down the road.
Mhm.
Well, cool. Well, Jim, I appreciate you jumping on with us and all the information. Always great and funny. And as I said before, I just really appreciate what you're doing for the bourbon world, and especially the small distilleries and brands, and kind of using your platform to highlight them. I mean, that's huge for a lot of these guys. So it's much appreciated. But I will put that, with middle child being out, there is a free discount for shipping if you buy both bottles. But yeah, if you want to tell them where they can buy it, and yeah, we could close it out.
Yeah. Father Time is it dash
Dash.
bourbon?
Yes.
I used to hash. Um,
That's a different website we go
yeah.
to for the hash. That's
But yeah, but I definitely Father Time Bourbon. It is a collectible, but I would also, whatever state you're in, it's like you should check out that local distillery.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Very some of them, they do a special brandy like in North Dakota or Nebraska. There's like a brandy for a berry that only grows in that state, so
Oh,
it's tough.
oh,
So
that's
particularly
now.
if
Now we got to go check that one out. Now I'm
Absolutely.
like, we need that on Seelbach.
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, so I would check it out, and we got to figure out a way where we can get to be able, because I don't like. I'm tired of checking bags at the airport. We should be able to travel with unopened bottles of booze.
Yeah.
It's really,
Apparently they still frown upon that. I lost samples I was taking to Brian because it didn't say 100 ml on the back. I'm like, but we know this is a 100 ml bottle, right? It's like, don't know, could be anything. I'm like, okay, pull a 100 ml bottle and we'll compare them. They are the same.
but
Uh,
thanks, really appreciate it. Good chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Have a good
Absolutely.
one.